I just think you could look at it and say, looked at multifamily, understand it. I don't want to invest in it. That's actually a good thing to realize as well. But if you're going to invest in it, you need to get educated at least somewhat enough to understand where you're making a good decision or not. I also wouldn't be forced into a deal. If you're working with somebody and they're pressuring you to invest and you just get that high pressure sales type thing, I personally don't deal with people like that. It drives me crazy. If they're like, this is the best deal ever, you're missing out, I'd pass. Listen to your gut.
That was Mark Kenney, co-founder of Think Multifamily. Stay tuned for an interesting conversation. The limited partner shares in the potentially outsized returns of a well-planned and executed investment, but as a passive investor, and has the maximum leverage on their most precious asset, their time. And that is why we're here together. 90% of the millionaires out there built their net worth with real estate. However, 0% of the billionaires are hands-on managing the real estate assets because there simply isn't enough time. My name is Jake Wiley, and for the past 16 years, I've been investing in real estate, and I've learned a thing or two. But the most important lesson is how to leverage the expertise and time of others to maximize your investment potential. Welcome to the Limited Partner Podcast. All right. Welcome, partners. Again, this is your host, Jake Wiley. This week, we've got another exciting episode. I'm joined by Mark Kenney. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jake, how you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for being here. So Mark is the co-founder of Think Multifamily. So I imagine we'll be getting into a multifamily discussion here, but Mark, I'll kick it over to you. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to Think Multi?
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate you having me on today, Jake. I grew up in Michigan. I'm in Dallas now, one of 7 kids. I have an identical twin brother. And growing up, both my brother and I were like, hey, we want to do something different than we're seeing everyone else doing because nobody in our family or extended family were entrepreneurs or anything. We went to Michigan State and we both went for accounting and started looking at doing real estate when we were seniors in college. We bought our first property when we were 22 in our hometown and started buying smaller properties, but we both also had corporate jobs. We were both CPAs, did IT consulting, had IT business. And my IT business was doing pretty well, at least I thought it was from a financial standpoint, but horrible from a life balance. I would work minimum 90 hours a week, sleep like 3 hours a night. My phone would go off 24 hours a day. Caused a lot of issues just because I wasn't able to spend time with my wife and things like that. So my wife and I were buying smaller properties in 2013. She's like, yeah, we need to start looking at doing something different. And I'm like, okay, in my spare time, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. But anyways, we joined up together. So co-founder, because my wife, Tamil, is not just someone that supports me, but the business wouldn't be anywhere near where it is without her and her skill set. And we started first as a passive investor, actually in 2013 in a syndication with a friend. And then we started doing our own. We've done value-wise about over $1 billion of transactions, over 90 deals, and we're in 12 states. And invest, as a lead, if you want to say syndicator, but also invest passively in real estate and some other investments as well.
So I love the story because I'm also an accounnt by trade.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, that's where this all started. I'm super jealous though that you started investing right out of school. Like if the advice, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something, I would have probably said, buy a house while you're in college, rent it out to your friends, sell it when you leave, and then let that be the seed for everything. But I guess the question for you is, how did you get started in real estate? Especially, I'd love to hear that.
I always kind of wonder, I always have these discussions with people in my mind as well, like nature versus, nurture, and why do I like certain things and not like other things? For whatever reason, both my brother and I, and fortunately my wife, Tamil, really liked real estate. I don't know why. And we were like, everyone needs a place to live. It seems to make sense. We really didn't know anyone doing it at all. And I don't know how we gravitated to it, to be frank, other than we're like, everyone needs a place to live. We were both like you, probably very analytical because we're both CPAs and things like that. But we could touch it, we could feel it, go buy it and look at it versus stocks. It's a roller coaster. There's no logic, in my opinion, whatsoever. And events that happen impact things that shouldn't impact. But real estate, we thought, hey, you know what? We think we could probably start buying some small properties, and eventually we were like, hey, we'll end up buying these properties and retire like when we're 40, right? And frankly, I don't want to, I'm past 40, obviously, but I don't want to actually retire, if you want to say. But we also kind of concluded that, you know what, we have to buy a lot of properties in order to, on our own, in order to replace income, because we were both, doing pretty decent income wise, doing IT and things like that. But it wasn't like we saw a commercial or someone in our family was doing it. It was one of those things we just thought, hey, we can touch it, feel it, makes sense. We can get a loan for it, which I'm not sure how we got a loan, but we did. I don't know, how they gave us a loan, but they did. And we're like, we can actually put a little bit down and leverage the rest. And it just made sense to us.
I think that's such a cool story, right? Because if you can get in early, especially before things get out of control. I mean, this is like what I want for my kids more than anything else
Right.
is get in early before you like run your salary up. Because I mean, everybody know, like most people probably know this. You feel your salary, right? Whatever you make, you start to like live into that lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, man, like I think about when I was in college, I lived off of $700 a month, and that had to pay for like my housing. I was like, man, if I could have started like that
Oh, yeah.
and replace $700, I could have done it no problem. But like as you get more into your career, and like you as a CPA, I was working, for somebody else, and now like in retrospect, like oh, I could have done so much better if I'd started early. So I'm
Yeah.
super jealous.
You get nervous. Like you get nervous because my IT business, I was making, pretty good money. I was like, I don't think I'm going to replace my income. And I didn't really have to replace it 100% in order to have a pretty good, lifestyle and things like that. But your point's well taken about the salary, because I have a nephew who's super smart, loves real estate and eager and all those things, and kind of wanted to start doing real estate. He's a police officer and literally just got promoted like 2 weeks ago to detective sergeant or whatever. Now he's like, oh, it's good and bad, because now he's kind of making more money and more control, and it's harder to get out of it.
It is so hard, especially the further on you get, right? And then you have
Oh, yeah.
family and kids, and like it all stacks up. But let's talk about the transition to multifamily. Probably similar to maybe a stress point. And I'm inferring here based on your story. My wife and I, very similar, invested in real estate, and we grew a portfolio, and we had properties in multiple states, and like we were growing. And one got to the point like with residential, so we had like singles and doubles, that it was just like we couldn't take anymore, like physically, emotionally, like we couldn't take anymore because it was just going to be too much, right? Like financial pressure, like you name it, like when you start having all these singles and doubles. And I didn't learn that lesson until later, right? That there's probably a better way, but I'd love to hear your transition into multifamily.
Exact same story. We were buying mostly 2 to 4 units and doing everything ourselves, plus working tons of hours doing evictions and trying to be handyman when we weren't that handy. And it became, I'm surprised actually we continued through it, because it was not a very good experience. My biggest thing, other than the time, which was important, was I also just got tapped out financially. So my wife and I, every 2 or 3 years, could buy another. At the time, we got married pretty young too. And then I'm like, okay, so I'm going to have to wait till what? I'm like 150 to have enough properties to do it. And we got burned out on that. And then when our friend was doing a syndication and kind of, we picked it up pretty quickly because we were already in the financial aspect of it and kind of things like that. I'm like, this kind of makes a lot of sense, because he's using a third party management company that does all the day to day for him. Other people, he's getting money from other people to buy bigger deals. And that's how, our kind of light bulb went off in our head. And my wife, fortunately really pushed me, because I'm like, I don't have time for this. But we ended up, making the time somehow. And we almost gave up after a year, because it took us a year to get our first deal. But we didn't. We kept through it, and we're persistent and patient and things like that. But I can tell you it was not a very good experience, because I lived in Michigan at the time. My brother and I would work till 10, 11 o'clock at night, come home, shovel snow, you name it. And again, I'm not sure how we continued to do it, because it wasn't great. But I'm like, once we learned going larger and really less headaches with the larger properties, it became, really a blessing to us.
Yeah, I can vividly recount, 1 o'clock in the morning, putting down baseboards and trying to lay tile and try and get, because we did some flips too, and trying to get all of those things done around a full-time job. This is part of the message that I want to get out there for the limited partners or aspiring limited partners, is that yes, you can go out and do onesie twosies and you can make decent money. And especially when the market was rising, like flipping was great. It's been great for a while, but it's not going to persist forever. But like you do get to a point where like the bank looks at you and be like, we're not giving you any more money, right? Like we're just not going to do it. Like you've just become too risky, and you feel it, and it's stressful. And I was doing this full time, probably I left my job, I was doing it full time. And we hit that point where the bank was like, that's it. Like you've maxed out the number of government loans that they'll give you. So like you're done. So I had to go out and start raising private money. And it was just like, yeah, we're doing like 1 or 2 deals a year because it was like every single one of them was a slog. So
Plus the recourse, when we were buying smaller properties, I'm
oh
sure
yeah,
with you, we're going to the bank, we had recourse debt, which means you do have personal liability, something happens. Now we have, $500 million in loans or whatever, and it's all non-recourse. So we don't have personal liability. Doesn't mean you can't go off and do whatever you want. You can't be stealing and unethical and lying, things like that. Then you're going to have recourse, but it's not a recourse loan. So if something happened to that particular property for whatever reason, we own like 60, then the bank looks at that one property. They can't come after me personally. They can't come after my other properties. So that's a major difference, especially when I started out when I was 22. I was kind of freaked out about having that personal liability because something happened. We missed rents, people paying us, which happened more often than it should. My brother and I didn't have a lot of extra money. We're just starting out to be able to cover that. So that was a big issue for me.
yeah. And then, I mean, the fear is real. Like, I mean, it could snowball very fast. It's like, if this one goes empty, or
Right.
they're late, and then it's like you start putting all the pieces together. Like, oh man, I've lived it. So if you're out there, and we haven't convinced you yet that maybe you should consider maybe just skipping doing the onesie twosies and jump right into a limited partnership. Hopefully that's why you're here. But I guess let's talk about that, because I think too it is not super simple, right? Like, you can't just jump in blindfolded and get into a limited partnership and hope for the best. What are some things that you've seen that aspiring limited partners or people that even experienced limited partners should be thinking about, especially now in this point in time where the market's really unpredictable?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think for one, just to your point, if you're a limited partner, there are different ways a syndicator, lead, whatever you want to refer to them as, can structure a deal. You can't just get into every deal. In some deals, you have to be accredited investor. In other deals, you might not. But that just is a starting point. The other thing I would say, how long has the person been doing it? Are they doing it full time? And if you're going to invest in anything, it really doesn't matter what it is, you want to at least have some base knowledge about some rules of thumb. Just because something doesn't fit a rule of thumb doesn't mean it's wrong, but you want some really good rules of thumb as a limited partner you can actually somewhat look at and say, okay, Jake has a deal, but I see the income growth is 10% year over year. Is that realistic? Oh, probably not. Or Jake has a deal and he has the cap rate he's assuming going to go down over time, which, for all practical purposes, we don't think is going to happen. Could, but it's not conservative enough. So I just think you could look at it and say, I looked at multifamily, understand it. I don't want to invest in it. That's actually a good thing to realize as well. But if you're going to invest in it, you need to get educated at least somewhat enough to understand where you're making a good decision or not. I also wouldn't be forced into a deal. If you're working with somebody and they're pressuring you to invest and you just get that high pressure sales type thing, I personally don't deal with people like that. It drives me crazy. If they're like, this is the best deal ever, you're missing out, I'd pass. Listen to your gut. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, is a general statement, women seem to have a little bit better intuition about people than guys. I don't know, it just seems to be the case. Have your wife speak to somebody if you're married, or you have, a woman that can speak to the lead or whoever it might be and just get a gut check. Because I can tell you, people are like, they're trying to invest with somebody and it's a pretty small world. And they ask me, well, do you know anything about this particular person? And I know a lot about different people. And it's like, okay, you don't want to just jump in blindly with somebody unless you know some background about them, what they've done. Have they have any issues? Have you ever had problems on a property? If they're like, no, I've never had a problem on any property, then I probably would not invest with them, frankly.
There's some really great points in there. I mean, I love the fact that I think as an entrepreneur, let's take a step back, right? As an entrepreneur, somebody's trying to grow a business. There's a tendency to want to know that, like, you got it, right? And that's what you want to project to everybody. And like VC guys and all these guys, they see it all the time. They've got the experience, and they know that, like, a real investor knows that there's issues. As a matter of fact, like, as an investor, you want to look at somebody and be like, how did you deal with the issues, right?
Right.
Because they come up. And if there's
Right.
no good like story, it's like, maybe you just haven't been in business long enough, or like, you're not telling me something.
No,
So
it's
I mean,
true because you don't even realize sometimes what you learn as you go through the process, right? And you look back and we've done, like I mentioned, over 90 deals, if reviewed tons of contract, and I can see, because we have a mentoring program too, but that aside, I can see people that are new that would get stuck and they wouldn't even know that they can't foresee what's going to happen in the future. I'm not saying I can predict what's going to happen, but I can tell you what will happen the way some of these contracts are written initially. If you're not smart enough to be able to pick up on some of these business terms about, okay, it's going to go back. If you get in some sort of litigation, everything goes back to the contract. So don't be like, oh, the broker told me we could get more time if we needed it, even though it's not in the contract. No, that doesn't work. So I just can't tell you how many things we run across on the buy side, the sales side, that I can see people, getting caught, or even, without getting all the details. I mean, you're an accountant too, but just accrual-based accounting versus cash-based accounting. And you're not talking like, tens of thousands of dollars difference. You're talking hundreds of thousands, in some cases, several $1 million difference in value, just the way the actual owner provides the financials to you. And if you're not smart enough to ask for the right financials or do your due diligence to validate, bank statements and things like that, we get pushed back all the time. That's a non-negotiable for us. We will not move forward on any deal if we can't, prove out the revenue. But a lot of people do. They'll move forward anyways, and they're going to get caught.
Yeah, that's being an accountant. I mean, you really kind of hit some interesting points. So accrual based, there's all kinds of revenue rules out there that start to make the financial statements completely different from what's actually happening.
Right.
And like somewhere out there, the regulators are like trying to say, hey, we're trying to put everything on the same playing field, because there's all these different games you can play with accounting. And therefore, like what happens is you can actually look at financial statements that look amazing, but there's no cash, right? There's no way to pay the bills. They're going to be in default on all their covenants. I'm not trying to scare you here, right? As you listen to this, like there are some just basic blocking and tackling things that you need to be thinking about. Mark, you're bringing up some really great points. And then this road has been trod, right? There are some great players out there that do this over and over again. There's no reason to jump into something that doesn't feel right.
That's right. And just to put it in perspective, not to belabor the point about, the accounting aspect, but a $25,000 difference doesn't sound like that much to somebody that doesn't understand. But if you're dealing with cap rates, which we don't have to, anything five units and above, but let's just say at a 5 cap, which is very conservative, a $25,000 misstatement on their financials is $500,000 you're overpaying for which that's the way it works. It's not made up. That's what you're overpaying for the property by $500,000 for a $25,000 mistake.
Yeah, that's real, right? And
it's real, and we see it all the time. We unfortunately, people don't want to share things, or they're not. I went through stuff initially and wish I would have learned these, things about transactions. I'm like, why wouldn't anyone teach us this stuff? And we share things we've had issues with, and that's how you learn. Is actually, like you mentioned, as far as how do you prevent those things from happening? Well, we want to be able to find, prevent mistakes, obviously, but if we have a mistake, find it quickly and fix it quicker than we ever could before, because we've seen a lot of different things. And I look back, years ago, I'm like, man, we could have really gotten in trouble, if we didn't, based on what we know now, I'm like, I'm glad we didn't, but we could have gotten in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, let's put that in perspective, right? At a 10 cap, everything is multiplied by 10. That just happens to work out that way. So at 5 cap, everything's multiplied by 20, right? That's the way it works. You're actually dividing, which has this like massive multiplication. The deals that we're looking at in today's market are somewhere between 2 and 3. So these things can be significant out there, and these like small changes. And those are the things that you really need to be thinking about when you're looking at a deal. Because your point was, are you expecting the cap rate to go down? Are you expecting the cap rate to go, at least to stay the same? Like we're at historically low cap rates, which means that everything is so sensitive, right? Everything has like a 30 multiple on it. Everything that you're doing right now has a 30 multiple on it. So if the cap rates go to 4, they go to 5, all of a sudden it's a big value change. And those, like just having a little education, and that's why we're having this conversation, is going to help so much when you're looking at a deal, because like it's those little nuances right there. Then you're like, oh, cool. Like cap rate, boom, move right on past it. Like what are the rents? What are all these things? If somebody makes a small, error on the cap rate favorably to the investment, like it's going to look terrible down the road as the market changes. And we're at a point where the cap rates are historically low. Yeah. Nothing surprises me anymore. Could they keep going down? Like, I guess, but like that can't be the expectation.
Yeah. Now the benefit is, if you've owned properties, we've sold and selling, probably sell about a dozen properties this year. And the benefit is, that same multiple works on the reverse side. So if you have your net operating income going up by $1, it's, $20+ of value. And that's how you, frankly, can make some pretty significant life-changing money. You can, even as a limited partner, and getting returns, a refinance or a supplemental loan or a sale. We're not saying we're going to try to time the market, but we sold about probably 10 deals last year, bought 24. We'll probably sell another 10 deals this year. We're already at over 20 deals this year. I'm not sure how, but we are. But, it's what kind of crazy thing, but it's not because, can't sit here and say, oh, we're all geniuses. We're so smart. And, we have to give some credit to the market, but it all comes down to taking action though, too. Could you be leaving a little bit of money on the table? I don't know. Some of these deals we've owned for a year and you're doubling your money in a year. Does it make sense to sell? I think so. I think you have a disproportionate amount of equity capture you're going to have in, 12 to 24 months, and you might keep another 3 years and get another 25%. I'm making that number up. But if you can do that, hit your 5-6 year projection in, 18, 24 months, you probably owe it to the investor to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, it's funny because when you think about cap rates, you think about a long-term hold, it makes you nervous.
Right.
But if you think about the value that you can create with a super low cap rate, so let's just say you buy a property, we'll do 5, right? Because that's an easy number to work with. Like every dollar in income net operating income that you increase on that property is going up by 20, right? Like, yeah, you can do some magic, right?
Oh, yeah.
With property that maybe has just been, just needs a little bit of love. Rents could go up. You could add some revenue here and there. Like, you can do some real good things with low cap rates. But if the investment thesis is a 5 to 7 year hold, like, I would hope to see somebody saying, we expect them to go from 3 to maybe 4, right?
Right. No, for sure. That's right. I mean, the other benefit too, just is the tax benefits that we've seen, and, that's different for everybody. But, for us, it's been significant with, the depreciation, with bonus appreciation and cost segregation and those type of things. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter term wise. It's just the limited partners, at least when we do deals, will be allocated a pro rata share of their depreciation. Now, whether they take it or not, or can, it doesn't go away. So if they can't take it for whatever reason and they do a sale later on, they can offset the sale with that depreciation. And the whole goal is, on paper, is not to make any money. That's reality. And the whole goal is not to pay any federal income taxes.
Yeah. So I guess as we kind of wind down here, what excites you about multifamily?
For me, it's, I originally started it more for reasons, just because of family issues and not having time with family. And now it's also, turned into pretty significant financial, benefit, frankly, which has allowed us to give back. Frankly, I didn't, when I was early on in my young and things like that, I never knew whether I'd want to give money away or anything, frankly, because, we didn't grow up with much. So I'm like, I don't know. My wife always wanted to. I'm like, how are you saying that? We don't have any money to give away. And so for me, we're going to a charity event tonight and things like that. So we're able to support some people in the missionary field that we know very closely, a nephew and some really good friends. So that has allowed me, when people say money's not important, they've never been without it. And it takes money to make things happen. So that's been a great thing for me. The other thing is just seeing other people in our group that have been able to, quit their 2 jobs, or the spouse, or both them and their spouse, to be able to quit their 2 jobs in a relatively short period of time. I don't know why I love it. You don't have to love it to be an investor in it, especially if you're a limited partner. I think if you're going to syndicate things like that, you're going to really want to like it a lot. But as a limited partner, I think it's proved that it's, from an inflation standpoint, it's been very resistant. It did phenomenal during COVID. Cap rates went down, which means pricing went up. Pretty much everybody was wrong on that, what was going to happen. And it's continued to perform, kind of over and over again. So yeah, we're in a cycle, like you said. Well, nobody knows. People guess all day long. They're wrong more times than they're right. But if you can be patient enough, you don't have to sell 3, 4, 5 years. You don't have to. Nothing forces you to do that. Cycles don't last. We haven't had a cycle where the cycle is down for 5 years. It doesn't exist. So just hold in there. Be patient as an investor. Get educated as an investor. And, you can be an investor that's a pain in the butt too, frankly. And as strange as it sounds, people don't want you as an investor. I'd rather not take money. And a pain in the butt doesn't mean you're asking questions. That's totally fine. But if you don't understand concepts, or you're like, this is all guaranteed, never can lose money, never do this. And you need to understand it's an investment. You need to go into it without that aspect of it. And again, get educated to ask some smart questions, and you'll be attractive to a syndicator doing deals, putting them together.
Mark, thank you. I usually end the show with gratitude, but you beat me to it. So thank you for sharing. But this has been a fantastic conversation. I love it. I love your background because it parallels so nicely with mine.
Sure.
But thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate it.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd actually love for you to contribute to a future episode. If you have a question you'd like answered or a topic or a guest to bring on the show, please email me at jake@thelimitedpartner.com. Now I realize there's a lot of lingo that's thrown around on these shows, so I've created a cheat sheet for you with the top 26 terms that come up most often. Head on over to thelimitedpartner.com/lingo for the list. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time.